and their mics. All right, there we all are. Thank you very much for joining us. We're happy to have you here with us. I'm going to begin with just going over the agenda for the 90 minutes, for the next 90 minutes. So Julian, if you can advance the All right, so this is our brief agenda for the 90 minutes. So I will give you a brief introduction to Zoom, and then Howard will introduce the speakers. Howard is our host this evening. Our presenters are Hannah Kim and Jae-Young Lee. And after he hands over to them, they will go over their presentation. And after they're done, we will have a Q&A session that will be moderated by Howard. And then after that, Julian Ward, who is our graduate assistant, will lead us through a few announcements, and then we will close at 6 o'clock. So thank you very much. Advance to the next one, Julian. All right, so just a quick note that when we come to the Q&A session, if you could use the Q&A dialog box that's at the bottom of your screen, depending on how you have your screen, please do not use the chat feature because we will not be able to moderate your questions from there. Use the Q&A dialog box. That way Howard will be able to see your questions and ask them to our hosts, or someone will answer them directly. We also ask you not to use the raise hand feature because no one will be monitoring that. If you need to use the chat feature, only use it for technical issues. Like if you can't hear someone, then send a note and Julian will be able to see that and we can see what we can do about it. So thank you again very much for joining us. Use the Q&A dialog box during the Q&A session, no chat feature and no raise hand feature. So I'm gonna hand it over to Howard Zehr. Hi, Howard.
Hi, Patience, and thank you for getting us started, and thank you to all who have joined us. We are all working remotely today. The university is closed because of a winter storm, snow and sleet and other nice things. So it's kind of an experiment here. Hannah Kim is in DC right now. She's in Washington, DC. Jay is back home in South Korea. Julian and Patience are in Harrisonburg. Yeah, so we're pleased about this. The topic today has to do with restorative justice work in Korea and Northeast Asia. We are going to hear about that work and also maybe get some ideas that we can translate to other contexts about how you get going, how you maintain these things. Next slide, Julian. Our guest, Hannah, was born in South Korea. She is a recent graduate of our program. She's a school teacher and a restorative justice practitioner and has been implementing restorative justice in schools and also doing some research that I think she's going to be telling us about. So welcome, Hannah. And the next slide. And Jae-Young Lee is a graduate also, but much longer ago. I can't remember what date it was. Jay, you may have to tell us. He is the founder of the Northeast Asia Regional Peacebuilding Institute, which maybe he will tell us something about, and also the Korea Peacebuilding Institute. Jay has been a key in the implementation of restorative justice in South Korea. Anybody who's involved there knows Jay, and he has been the dynamo behind it all. So we're really pleased to hear from you. So I think, Jay, you're going to go first, as I understand it, and then you'll turn it over to Hannah. And the rest of you, your questions, your comments, put them in the Q&A, and I'll watch those and try to make sure we get a chance to ask those questions or share those comments. So, Jay, feel free to take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Howard. Hello, everybody, and as Howard introduced, I'm Jae-Young Lee. Let me put my...
You're going to put your, Jay, and you can take our slides down, and then Jay is going to put his up.
Okay. Yes. This is early morning here in Korea. It's 6:30. So I'm not get used to this kind of presentation in this time of the day. So I hope you understand if I don't clearly speak. I graduated from CJP EMU at 2003, but my last time to be there as a student was 2002. So I didn't realize until Howard mentioned today, it's been really for a while. And I'm not sure I'm a key person of restorative justice in Korea, but I'm trying to apply what I've learned. Okay, let me click this first.
Yeah,
Does it work? Okay, good. So today I'd like to share what we have done in the field of restorative justice and a bit of work in Northeast Asia in the region here. So I'll just go through the PowerPoint and try to explain you what it will look like. Let me start with the community that I belong to. As you notice here, the name, the Peace Building Community. The first time that I heard the term peace building, it's Summer Peace Building Institute at EMU. And that was the life-changing experience for me. First thing is, I got to know that the concept of the peace building, conflict transformation, restorative justice. So it was a great time for me to grow into the field that I really get used to it. But also, this is a chance where I met many peace builders all over the world. It was quite encouraging experience that there are people out there doing a great peace work. So it motivated me to my practice back home and the region. So because of that strong impact from EMU, later when I start this community, I like to put the name Peace Building. And actually the building that we are living and working, the name is actually Peace Building. So it's now a permanent address of our place. So it's a people, but also it's a building. And these are the people that I work with and also my family. We have about 25 staff doing different parts. The biggest organization that we are running is Korea Peace Building Institute. But in terms of the network, Northeast Asia Regional Peace Building Institute is the wider network. If I go through a brief history of our organization, I started working for Korea NFF Center. I was one of 3 founders in this organization. And as you see the name, it was an Anabaptist group, mainly Mennonite connection. So I was a peace program coordinator at KAC since 2001 for about 10 years. During those time, I started to introduce the concept of restorative justice, but the practice was not really start until like 2005 or 6. And Northeast Asia Regional Peace Building Institute, I founded it in 2008. And this is model after a summer peacebuilding institute at the EMU, I like to start something like peacebuilding institutes in the region. So that's why I started this. And the Korean Web Center was split into two groups because we decided to leave out of Seoul, and the KAC moved to another city, and I and other staff, we started the Korea Peacebuilding Institute from 2011 as we moved our office and focus more on to peacebuilding work. Then the restorative justice movements grow after COPI was established. So I also founded a non-profit association called the Korea Association for Restorative Justice in 2015. So these are the organizations that I worked in. And let me just go through some of our work. COPI is doing a lot of workshop, especially on the restorative justice. Our audience at the moment, the biggest audience is the school teachers group. And I think Hannah will share a little more of how it impacted the teachers in schools later. We also publish books and the materials that can people use in their practice. So that's another part. CARD, the Korea Association for Restorative Justice. This is the gathering of people who went through our training and they want to involved in or support the restorative justice movement in Korea. And now we have about 400 members in this association, and there are different activities going on. Another area that we are doing at our office is the school, a small school for local kids called the Peace Building School. And this is basically English school, after school program. Now it's much smaller size, but this is the peace education based English courses for children. So this is another activity that we are doing. Lastly, we also have a cafe in our first floor. This picture looks much better than the real cafe, but anyway, it's a nice place for gathering and meeting people and just resting. So this is what we are doing and who we are. Let me go through how we do restorative justice practice. As I mentioned, RJ concept was introduced in early 2000, and civil society level, we are the first group, but there are also the experts or researchers in criminology. They also start to writing or doing the research project from like early 2000. About 5 years later, after long discussion before this experimental projects called victim offender dialogue, mainly for juvenile cases. It was proposed by Seoul Metropolitan Police and the Seoul Family Courts. It was just an accident, but one of the researchers from this institute called me saying that she did her research here in Canada, and she saw RJ programs done by legal system. So she wanted to do something like that in Korea. And she didn't know there's a group who actually trying to do or train people to this kind of work. So we were connected with them, and we started getting the cases from the governments. 2008, teachers and schools start getting the restorative discipline training. And the background of this was because the corporal punishment was officially banned around that time, and teachers were looking for alternative in their discipline method. So I didn't know until that time that many teachers were struggling with that transition. And also because we got cases of the juveniles from the family courts, we dealt a lot of school violence issues. So that was why I think it was happened. After 3-4 years experimental program, the Seoul Family Court officially adopted the victim offender dialogue. Actually, the Korean name for this program, it's called the Program for Encouraging Reconciliation, like a literal translation, which I didn't like the name at the beginning because, of course, victims didn't like the reconciliation before they even talk with the offender. So there are some challenges, but now it is all over the country. The program is done by the court. And then 2013, the province, actually this is the biggest province in Korea, the Department of Education also officially adopted the restorative discipline as their main approach to student behavior. So it was time that we start working with a lot of schools and school teachers. So as I mentioned, we got more people who went through our training and they want to connect with us. So year 2014, we established the Korea Association for Restorative Justice. And then the restorative discipline training for schools were spread into more areas. As we did the workshops and trainings and the programs, a hospital approached us and they want to get training for their staff and also the other legal agencies that want to do more like a victim offender mediation training and also programs. 2017, we begin Korean style or Korean model of implementing the restorative justice into city level. So this is still very beginning, but we realize that the restorative justice practice cannot be done by one area. It should be the all aspect of our society or even the life. So restorative city project is the kind of ultimate goal that we like to get as we do our practice. The end of last year and early this year, last month, CARJ issues restorative justice certification as a formal license for RJ practitioners in Korea. As I told you, there are many people went through our training and become a member of our association. But when they try to do something with what they learned, maybe it's more in Korea, but other countries too. The organizations or schools or the governments request for a certain level of official the education background or training background. So many people want to have that certification. So that's why we start to issue it. So people who went through like 80 hours training, they got the third level certification, and additional 100 hours, they got the second level certification. And another like 65 hours, they will get the first level certification. And we don't have any universities or colleges offering the restorative justice courses. So at the moment, this is I guess, the longest and hardest training that they can get in Korea. So we've been doing a lot of workshops and lectures and all kind of work that relate to RJ. And now it's more than 1,000 times annually since 2015. So I would say still growing widely and into the new areas. As I show you where or how it's practiced in Korea in this diagram, as you are probably familiar all over the world, the restorative justice for like a legal system, that's the one area. But as I mentioned, the restorative school project is quite rapidly growing. And also because we are dealing with the school issues or school violence, like parents' education is also becoming an important portion. So restorative family, we said, that's another area that we like to focus. And also the restorative organizations like hospitals and churches and companies, they also start adopting this approach. And ultimately, we like to get into the city level. So that's another area that we like to, or we're doing practice. These are some of pictures of our practice. As early as like grade 1, like first grade element kids, they're also sitting in the circle after they have some issues. We train the parents so that they can go to school and become facilitators for circle process or victim offender dialogue after school violence issues. Sometimes we directly involved in school conflict, especially when there's a severe or violence issues happens. Yeah, there are many areas that I think our country has to deal with, but the family issues become the like school issues, and the children who grew up in the more like a broken or unstable family situation, they got trouble at school and also society. So it's setting that the basic concept of the community, either from family to society, it's getting weaker. So that's produced a lot of issues and problems. Sometimes a bigger size of people involved in this program, especially here in this picture, about the 40 people joined to the conference, restorative conference. when there's a violence happened among students. We also do healing circle for teachers who are interested in speaking or talking about their own issues. As I mentioned, because the schools are looking for alternative approach, we do a lot of networking and sign the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the Department of Education in different provinces. Also, this is a group been working with us. They want to train the senior group to become mediators in their town. Because of our Confucianist society culture, maybe they think that it's good to train these elderly people. These are some of pictures that how we do with the police court on victim offender dialogue. It's not very often, but we also do restorative practice for inmates. So it depends like who in the prison system, but some staff of prison are looking for a restorative approach. And this old man in this picture who lost the 3 family members by a serial killer, and he is meeting the other case, but murderers who's in prison. The picture here showing the prison guards training, and also the judges and prosecutors meetings that try to spread the concept of RJ and also the practice that can be done into their system. There's an interesting project going on now, is the building restorative apartment community. And this particular apartment is not built yet. It is being built now. Next year, about 1,500 people will move into these apartments and live together. Even though the apartments are not physically built, the people who were going to live here, they are going through our training. And the main reason why they are getting RJ training is because they like to build a strong community and preparing for the productive way of dealing conflict, which they are going to face as they live together. So in Korea, more than 50% people are living in these kind of apartments where there are a lot of small issues happening as they live, like noisy smoking or parking. So this is, to me, this is quite interesting group that they spend a lot of time and energy to train the people, the neighbors, before they live together. So I hope these projects are going well. And one of the main hospitals in Seoul, who has about 7,700 staff working together, they're also going through our training for more than 3 years now. I didn't know until I got involved in this project that there are so many conflicts happens in this working place, the verbal or even physical violence. So our staff are working with the nurses and doctors and staff who can freely share their feelings and impacts from the behaviors of their coworkers, and try to find a solution together. Other organizations like World Vision or groups also going through our training and try to implement what they've learned into their working place. This is a picture of the rehabilitation center. It's done by government. And these are the people who lost their job, or even like coming from the really broken family situation, and try to get training to get the job. But many of them are living together, and these co-workers are the only people they can rely on. But there are many issues and conflicts occurred among themselves. So this rehabilitation center asked us to do the RJ training. It's not big movement, but church leaders or community, a Christian community, ask us to do workshop, especially for leadership training. And I guess there are many areas that we need to work with the churches in Korea. There are a lot of issues going on. We also provide the regular academy in different topics of restorative justice, and it's been 5 years. So every month we provide the topic that people might be interested in. Sometimes restorative city, restorative education, and also the gathering among school teachers. So it's an opportunity for people who don't even get formal training, but they can get the concept and the practice of restorative justice in the different fields in a society. Sometimes we also invited to be part of the discussion organized by different groups. So that's another chance that we promote the restorative justice concept and practice. So from the small scale, like how we transform the class culture from more violence or the competitive into the peaceful and also cooperative. We do the training for teachers and provide the programs for students. So that's a restorative class, and it's moving into the school, and also invite the parents to coming into this movement, and that will also share the village level, and also the legal system, and then eventually the city level. So that's the direction that we like to move forward. And the restorative city, the city governments can support the local center, like a restorative justice center, and the legal system, or courts or police, and also schools can refer the cases, and also the center can provide the trainings for the people who are working in that organization. So I started learning that the understanding of the leadership in the city is important, and also the people who live in this city who get through the training, like the people who got our certification, they can establish their local center for restorative justice, and through that the practice can be spread not only for legal system, but also their own the community and schools. There have been different events that we promote the restorative city, and people become interested in this a bigger project. And this project has to require the more people's understanding and support. So I like to push more on this project so that the different city governments understand why the security and peace in the city is not only the duty or jobs of the politicians, but it's also the people's movement. Last year, we invite a resource person from her in UK, and he shared some of the ideas of how they did the restorative city project. So it was quite a learning experience, and we like to do our own way, but something like what her or other cities in UK trying to do. So these are the summer practice that we've been doing. And the last part that I like to point out is how we do RJ, or Peace Building through Northeast Asia Regional Peace Building Institute. Our region has a lot of ongoing issues. First thing is a territorial conflict. It is not visible, but the territorial conflict is one of the reasons why the countries in Northeast Asia are going into more like building strong military or getting more political conflict, dispute. So there are potential dangers that we are sometimes getting into it. And as you know, territorial conflict is pretty much identity-based conflict. So I see a lot of potential issues are happening. Another serious problem is historical conflict. Not like in Europe, in Northeast Asia, after the Second World War, the history was not fairly dealt with the countries or people around it, because the so-called superpower countries at the time, the USSR and US, was the main conqueror of the war. So the Korean War began after the Second World War, and those unfinished issues still haunting the people and society in our area. So it was hard for me how to begin the concept of restorative approach into the this kind of big and generational conflict. But as I met and listened to these victims, like Hibakusha, A-bomb survivors, also survivor of so-called comfort woman system, sexual slaves of under Japanese colonization, and also the survival of Nanjing massacre. It was interesting to me that when we invite them and hear their stories, these are the victims of the structural violence, and all of them, whether they're from Japan or China or Korea, share the same story or same message, which was never again, meaning they hope and pray that they will become the last victims of structural violence or historical conflict. So it was a strong message to me that how we highlight the voice of the victims and how we transform that message into our learning. So this is the small the cycle of response to historic conflict that I think we should try as a RJ practitioner. Historical conflict, of course, creates the needs, the justice needs, and when these justice needs are unmet, you could move into the collective anger, which is quite the big scale. And that supports the military education. And that military education is also stimulated the antagonism among the people. And then the desire for revenge will grow up. And then we're back to another conflict. But when the justice needs are dealt and met, I think that the collective lament could happen, and then it will lead into a totally different education, which is called the peace education, I believe, and it will move into the understanding of ourselves and others, and that will give a room for restoration, and I think that will eventually lead us the possibility of historical reconciliation. So for the Northeast Asia, we need a safe space where we need to talk about the impacts of the historical conflict into the people's lives, not only the becoming political agendas. And one of the practice I could do for this purpose is the providing safe space. So that's the background of I started the NALPI project. So we did the first training in 2011, and Howard Zehr was there as a main speaker, and also the car was invited for facilitating an RJ course. We provide 6 courses, 3 in first week and 3 the second week, and 3 days field trip in middle. The second training was done in Hiroshima, Japan. The third training was back in Korea, near DMZ. Fourth training was done in Nanjing, China. And fifth was near Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. And sixth was Taipei, Taiwan. And the seventh was Okinawa, Japan. And as you can see, the areas that we intentionally choose a conflict area, or the area that a lot of historical issues are there. Last year was Jeju Island in South Korea. And this year we are planning to do this summer training in Nanjing again, in China. And this time, Nanjing Masakyo Memorial Museum will co-host this event. So we're trying to provide the courses and also place where people can talk about the sensitive issues and learning from different positions. There's also the program for youth, and it's mainly for China and Japan and Korea youth, and they spend about 7-8 days together learning peace and also friendship, so that they can learn something that they couldn't learn from their own schools, especially these historical issues. So this is another chance that we also promote the concept of restorative justice, and also the peace building, which is very new or unfamiliar issues. Yeah, this is the staff that I work with, and we try to do and also live as we do the work, but it's also should be the lifestyle. So yeah, that's all I'd like to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, I've got some interesting issues that raises. I'm impressed at the many different areas of involvement you have, but we'll turn it over to Hannah. But in the meantime, remember, those of you who are listening, feel free to post your questions and we'll get to them after she's done. Go ahead, Hannah.
Yes, thank you. I met restorative justice in 2012 by Kopi, and it was around the time that I really was trying to quit my job as a teacher. It's been around 10 years since I started teaching. Now I'm working in a high school, girls' high school. And I was like, when I was in elementary school, I had an experience of being bullied. And I've never shared this experience before I became a teacher. Especially before I met restorative justice, I didn't want to share it with anybody because especially with students, even though I knew that, especially in March is the month of the first month of the school year in South Korea. And I usually share my stories, but I try not to share any kind of experience related to being bullied when I was in elementary school, because I didn't know how to, especially I knew that around 1/3 of the students in a classroom had experiences of being bullied, statistically. But I didn't know how to deal with that as a teacher. And in 2011, I had a lot of conflicts in my classroom, but I didn't know how to resolve the issue. So I was trying to quit, but I happened to search the Google and the word conflict, and I happened to meet with Korean Peace Building Institute. And I participated in the workshop, and from the beginners level to advanced level. And I felt like I found a light in the middle of the darkness, because I've never heard of any kind of way related to how to deal with conflict. So in 2013, I started to practice RJ in my classroom. But there are a lot of structural barriers I faced. So, and also I was strongly encouraged by the director of CoPG to participate in NARPI. So I participated in NARPI workshops for 2 years in Mongolia and China. And there I met a lot of good people, especially from CJP, and I decided to study abroad. And I graduated last year, and I came back to Korea, and last year I came back to Korea and I taught high school students. Especially after graduation, as I came back to Korea, I tried to be very careful applying what I learned in CJP, because I thought that I have to observe first, and especially what is really going on for the past 2 years. So, and also I had an opportunity to work on the one of the chapters in a book that is going to be published this coming year, and it is about exploring how RJ movement has grown in South Korea by empowering educators to be internally transformed and at the same time be agents of change at the structural level. So I interviewed several key practitioners in each province in Korea, and I learned a lot through the interview. So today I would like to briefly share what I learned from them, and I also would like to interact more with the participants based on the questions. Especially what I really was interested in was what drives personal transformation among educators rather than what was the results of their transformation. Because most of the research is very focused on what is the positive effects of RJ in education sector. But it was really hard for me to find what is really going on internally among educators, especially those practitioners. So I tried to ask those questions, and I found the voluntary practice with integrity was the key for their personal transformation. And those voluntary practice empowered students as well as their colleagues. And what I was surprised was that, especially in terms of colleagues, even though you practice with integrity in your educational settings, it does not necessarily mean that you can regain recognition from all of them, because there are also unsupportive colleagues. But what I heard from those practitioners was that their stories related to their colleagues' transformation, internal transformation, especially over time, not right away, caused by those practitioners' genuine practice. And they pointed out those transformations was caused by two key things, which were RJ philosophy as the source of empowerment, and also RJ practice. And those who are empowered internally started voluntarily practice where they are. And those led to transforming students and colleagues. But they also noted that what we really need to focus on was what really drives transformation rather than the results of transformation. Because if we misinterpret what really drives those transformation, it can be easily co-opted. Because some people might think that the transformation is caused by some good program. So that's why some policymakers are focused on making RJ some good, they think, programs, and those can lead to some unexpected consequences. So I would like to share this if there's questions later, if you want. And also, those practitioners share several kinds of structural challenges they're facing now. But there are two challenges that were emphasized the most, that were bureaucratic system and retributive system and culture. And one of the key challenges is that the current school violence prevention law in Korea, because now it is not allowed for any teachers in school to have a RJ dialogue if any kind of school violence is reported, because it is under the law we have to report to the committee that is going to determine what kind of steps to be taken. So it is not teacher's right; it is the committee's right. So if any homeroom teacher try to deal with the school violence case on their own without reporting, they have to face the risk of being accused of covering up the case. So before those challenges, there is a huge gap between what the practitioners are asked by the reality and what they really want to pursue as the ideal. So what I really tried to ask those practitioners were, even though, regardless of these challenges, what really makes you keep moving forward? And they pointed out several key concepts, and some of them were internal power, empowered by their experiences of RJ practice, and also building solidarity are the key things for them to keep moving forward. And they also pointed out, even though they face those big challenges before them, but they think these rather made them realize personal changes are not enough to address the structural challenges. So they broaden their horizons through these challenges. And there are several practitioners who also share their experiences, how they are working for structural challenges. So if there's any question for any stories that I've shared, so I would like to share more details later. Howard?
All right, thank you, Hannah. Good. We'll go to the questions now, and again, keep posting them if they come up to you. One question that has come up early on is just the prison-based work you're doing. Jay, you mentioned that. What's the goal of having restorative justice in prison? What are you hoping to see at the end of the day happening to the inmates that will be impacted by the RJ work? What's the goal of prison work? Tell us a little more about that. This comes from someone who is involved in implementing restorative justice in prison.
Okay. Well, thank you for asking the question. After I facilitate that program in prison, actually I got 2 phone calls. One is from the inmates who live in prison. He got the life sentence. And he said that the meeting the victim, even though it was not a direct victim, it was so powerful that he reflects that the time that he spent in the prison. Meaning he thought he took responsibility of what he did, but after hearing his story, the victim's story, he realized that he didn't really take responsibility. So what he decided was he decided to send donation to the victim support group from prison, even though it was probably a very small amount because his situation, but he thought that was the way of practicing or the real way of taking responsibility. So he would not change any status of his life, but I think he want to take a true responsibility to facing into more victims instead of the government or the system. So to me, that was quite a strong message. Another phone call I got was from one of the participants, the inmates who were released sometime later. And he said that he now back into society, and that program was the most powerful program he experienced in the prison. And he want to go find the victim's family and try to say sorry or explain how remorseful he was, but he knew that that would scare the whole family again. So he said that the only way that he could do is like live faithfully in the society as a member and becoming a good person. So I don't know what's the impact or outcome that I expected as I designed the program, but I think it was quite strong impact for the inmates and also the victim, the Mr. Ko, whom I sometimes visit or he came to our house. One time he told me that what we copy is doing in a society, he thinks that is very preventive work. Even though he lost his family members by this serial killer, he said that if offender, if he met a right teacher or if he met a right people around him who helped him to be responsible when he did the small crimes and when he was teenagers, maybe my family members were still alive. So this victim who participated in our program, he was also learned that there is a other way or hopeful way of dealing crimes. So he's very supportive for our movement. So yes, there's still things to do after this serial crime happens, I believe. I hope that answers you.
So your program in prison, you do some restorative justice education, training in there, right? And you have some meetings that are involved surrogate victims rather than the matched victims. Is that right?
Yes, this is like a Sycamore project, Sycamore Tree project. Yeah,
And do
by
you do direct victim offender dialogue at this point?
no, especially the finding victim who's willing to come and meet the inmates were not easy. And this particular case, because of the serial killer killed 21 people, and in Korea we still have the death penalty sentence, but it's not practiced for almost like 20 years. So I think it was impossible to even meet his direct offender. So, yes.
Are there cultural issues? Either one of you can answer. Are there cultural issues that would make a direct meeting more difficult than in some other cultural contexts? I know some cultural contexts people say that people are private, or there's various constraints on actually talking together. And I'm just curious whether you find that true in your context.
Culturally speaking, from my limited experience, I think we are more like an indirect communication culture. So the meeting, face-to-face dialogue, it's culturally speaking, it's more harder than the Western society, I believe. Also, saving face culture is strong.
Yeah.
So yes, it's true in one way. Hannah, what do you think?
Can you explain more?
And Jay was saying that maybe there's some cultural, it's more likely to be open to indirect communication than actually sitting down together. Would you find
Yes.
that true as well?
Yes, because even in educational settings, especially based on my experiences, especially there, from my experience, when there is a power dynamics behind, it's really hard to talk directly what you really want to say. So maybe that's one of the kind of criticism that I sometimes hear from those dissents that do not agree with RJ approach, even among teachers, my colleagues. So, and also some practitioners I interviewed, they pointed out that part.
Thank you. Before we go on to another area, that Kajunga, you may know, Hannah, you know Kajunga. He's asking this question. He asked a follow-up question, so I'll go with that one. One of the biggest challenges I have heard from you, Hannah, in restorative justice implementation is a structural barrier. What is the best way of overcoming this barrier? Do you want to say a little bit about what he means and what your answer is to that?
I would like to know what kind of barriers Kajungu.
What kind of structural issue?
What kind of structural issue? Yeah, because it's too broad. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Maybe he'll put that in here next.
Yes. Yes.
Let's go on to another question, and maybe we'll get that follow. The question is about what kind of materials you are using in training. So that's the general question. What kind of materials are you using in training? And I know from my experience that you've developed a lot of your own materials, but what kind of materials are you using in your trainings?
Well, it's every year it changes, but the basic areas that we like to cover through our materials are the framework of restorative justice. That's the main thing, and also to me that is the most important area. So a lot of the quotations from Howard, your book Changing Lenses, the comparison of the questions, the basic framework is the one area, but also how we strengthen there's a sense of a community before we start talking about the conflict, how we build a good relationship. So our material also covers a lot of the circle process, trust the circle, community circle, and also the material covers how to do victim offender mediation, or kind of the questions, the restorative questions, that how we raise those. So our material covers a lot of the concept and also practice, skill-based training too. Also the case studies that because we have different programs that we like to share with the others so that they can learn from our experience. So yes, our materials cover those areas.
It sounds like as a practice form, circles may be more appropriate in your context and more individualized, like victim and defender dialogue. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, when I studied at EMU, the circle process was not very strong. But in terms of practice, especially meeting with the school teachers, it has to be a community approach. So we start doing a lot of the circle process as well.
There's a question from a current Korean student here at EMU that you're providing training for the elderly. Consideration of the Confucian culture in Korea. Do you think that Confucianism is a support or a hindrance to restorative justice practices? Perhaps Confucianism may imply a culture of authoritarian top-down approach that can be difficult for restorative justice. And then also how do elderly members respond to restorative justice? So two questions, one, how the elderly respond, and the other about Confucian culture. Both of you can answer this.
Yeah, just speaking about culture, it's not easy because the culture that I experience is also probably different than the culture that we talk as a Korean, because the culture has many different uh, levels of understanding. But Confucianism, uh, it's yes, it has a lot of challenges because our approach is basically emphasize the equality of speaking, and even like bottom-up approach is more necessary. However, as you know, the Korean society has been very westernized after the Korean War, and in some statistics shows that Korea has the least um, score for the feeling the sense of community these days among OECD countries. That tells that the our Korean society, um, culturally, yes, we are dominated by Confucianism in ideas, but in the real life, the Confucianism does not really impacts the behaviors of the people. To me, this confusion, because of we live in such a transitional time, um, sometimes Confucianism bring people together uh, to listen to the so-called the elders, but that doesn't mean like it give automatic authority to the elders anymore. So like the training for the elderly people who want to be the mediators for the town, they share with us that the gray hair doesn't work anymore. So to me, we have to create a new approach, new culture, where not it's only based on the ages, but how we show the respect. Um, if we build a different dimension of the relationship, so yeah, I'm not sure the Confucianism is always good or bad for the RJ practice, but um, I think understanding the concept of the RJ, that is the more important than the just a traditional understanding of our culture. So yeah.
Hannah, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, what was interesting while I was interviewing was that it was really hard to hear like the word Confucian culture as the key challenges. I can maybe answer to the question by Kajungu. The most of the people pointed out the bureaucratic structure and culture actually as the key challenges. When they say this, what they mean by that was that especially bureaucratic system assign a key power, a real power to those professionals, so-called professionals. And practitioners think that, so what is the professional in South Korean educational settings? And they said, the current system is that most of the people working at the education offices are assigned their positions randomly by the system. So, but the thing is that the real professionals are those working practitioners in the front line. So the practitioners say that those professionals did not ensure the practitioners' ownership of the process of the recent restorative justice movement in South Korea. So it is more about taking ownership. So I want to say the current bureaucratic structure is more challenges rather than our cultural aspects, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Let me go on to another question. And in the meantime, Julian, my computer has locked up on the QA in the chat. So I think there might be a question or two that I'm not seeing and I can't. So if you can send that to me maybe in the chat window, Julian, maybe I can pick that up. Another question here has to do, talking about the large scale of the work you're doing. Are there enough workers capable of carrying out the work? How about the present situation of the staff's level and solidarity with other organizations working together? So we'll talk a little bit about the working number of workers you have and your needs and so forth.
Yeah, every year our work grows, so we can't expect what's coming. It might be peak time and it might be the beginning of a long way. It would be nice to have a more staff, but that also gives us a lot of challenges. And in Korea, there are many other organizations that are doing a similar work. It's growing as well. And we do have a civil society network for restorative justice among the 5-6 different organizations trying to share the experience and do common project. And as a new field, yes, it is challenging, but also it is opportunity to how we work together. But as a manager, as a director, hiring more staff is always has a two sides. So I have to find a good way of connecting with the other organizations. But you know, sometimes if you work in your own organization, you can't have enough rooms to see others because you are just busy with the organization. So that's the area that maybe I or the leadership of COPI has to do more to see. At the moment, we are quite busy with carrying on the task that we has to tackle. Hopefully that we have a better position that where we can see more around. Maybe Howard can give us good advice.
I doubt it. We have a few more questions. We have about 5 minutes or so yet. There's a question here. My systems, it's not working here. One of the questions that I remember here, Hannah, was that, do you have any quotes from their teachers in the interviews that you could hear some quotes, but I don't know if you have that.
Okay, yeah.
I know you just flown in.
Let me read.
Okay.
Yes, one of the practitioners said, I was at rock bottom. I was teaching ethics and values. However, it didn't seem like my students were learning about values, but instead they seemed to be learning about how to swear in school. This made me feel hopeless and ashamed as a teacher of ethics. I thought to myself I couldn't do this anymore because I felt hopeless and worthless. I regretted having chosen to teach ethics. This is because I felt useless watching myself as a teacher of ethics, being incapable of educating the students to change their misbehaviors. I wanted to find a way to communicate with students peacefully instead of yelling at him. So I started to study nonviolent communication. It was helpful, but not enough. I realized I wanted to bring peace to the classroom and school. When I learned about RJ, I felt I had found a breakthrough. I felt I found light in the darkness. It just felt so right. Although I didn't have any experiences with RJ practice and conditions were not easy, I had no fear. Since I was so certain that I found the answer, I didn't hold back from doing RJ. Yeah.
Thank you. We have, as I said, about 5 minutes. Julian, are you in a position to pick up and maybe work in the last question or so and then go ahead and with your part? Mine is really acting really weird. My audio and video is working, but the other things aren't working on my screen. So I can't read the questions. So is that all right?
Yeah, not a problem. Okay, I'm just pulling them up.
Probably more than we can get through, but do what you can here.
Could you share a little bit more about the practical key contents of RJ education for school and students and elderlies, and how you achieve conflict transformation through RJ in a school?
Hannah, you want to share?
Actually, I read these questions, the Q&A box, and she asked especially how you achieve conflict transformation through RJ circle process in a school. This reminds me of some sharings by practitioners. What was kind of interesting was some practitioners said RJ is not circle process, but because of the policy by the educational offices, there's kind of misinterpretations among some teachers that RJ is circle program. So some practitioners say sometimes it's a circle process is not working in some context. So in my case, I can just speak for myself. In my case, I don't practice a circle that much, but I try to invite students more to share. I think that creating a safe space is much more important. After that process, a circle process can work well. So for me, it takes about 1 semester to create that space. And the second semester, I try to bring circle process later. Yeah. Jay?
No, I think that's good.
I think the rest of the questions, I am not able to tell which ones have been.
Well, there is a following up question about the prison program.
Okay, yes.
Why don't you do that one yet, and then we'll move toward a conclusion.
Okay. Do you have the big picture you are hoping to see from the prison system related to the RJ work? I don't think I have enough experience to say this, but to me, at least all inmates need to understand that the impact of their behavior and how they destroy the people's lives instead of taking the legal responsibility. So to me, I'm not sure how to change the prison system in big scale, but we do have education programs happening in the prison. And I hope that there are more RJ framework can go into this inmate education program so that they have a chance to see their way of taking responsibility is the only way of the doing responsibility, because they inmates most of them will come back to society. So I think it's very important to have this approach and opportunities.
All right, thank you. Julian, why don't you wind this up, and then I'll come back yet and before we conclude. Your mic is muted. There you go.
We have a couple webinars coming up. March 20th, we have Restorative Circles and Healthcare Systems, RJ as an approach to health equity and justice. And April 17th, Love and Living Soil, Restoring Justice for Land and Community. Upcoming STAR trainings, Strategies for Trauma Awareness and Resilience, otherwise known as STAR, is a research-based training program that brings together theory and practices from neurobiology, conflict transformation, human security, spirituality, restorative justice to address the needs of trauma-impacted individuals and communities. This program is designed for individuals and organizations whose work brings them into contact with populations dealing with current or historic trauma. Visit the website below to sign up. We also offer a Restorative Justice Graduate Certificate at the Center for Justice and Peace Building. It's 18 credit hours with equal focus given to conflict analysis and practice, restorative justice studies, and electives, which could focus on monitoring, evaluation, and psychosocial trauma. The certificate can be completed through a number of courses offered through the annual Summer Peace Building Institute or through a combination of one semester on campus and one summer term. We also have a Restorative Justice in an Education degree, a master's in education with a restorative justice concentration, and also a 15-hour graduate certificate in RJ in education, which can be used in a variety of professional working settings. And we have a master's in conflict transformation and a master's in restorative justice. I'm getting a master's in restorative justice. It's an excellent opportunity. I highly recommend it. And you can visit our website, the Zehr Institute, with all of the past webinars, resources, events, and upcoming webinars. The recording for tonight's webinar will be available early next week. Thank you, and back to Howard.
Thank you, Julian. And thank you, Jay and Hannah. I know, Jay, it's early in the morning there in South Korea. Sorry to get you up so early. Hannah, you just arrived and are jet lagged, so it's, both of you had your challenge and you've done a great job. Really appreciate it. And hope to see you in person again here before too long. So,
yeah, see you in Korea.
Thank you.
good. All right, we'll see you. And from Eastern time, good night. You can come see us again.
Bye.
Bye.